It was July 10th, and I had just flown in from London to the small town of Hurricane, Utah, for a well-deserved vacation. The last few months had been a whirlwind of intense training and covert operations, and I was looking forward to a few weeks of relaxation and fun. I had packed my military gear and my signature ghost mask just in case any unexpected situation or adventure were to arise during my vacation. I knew that the small town of Hurricane, Utah was a quiet and peaceful place, but one can never be too prepared, especially when you're a trained and skilled special ops soldier like myself. As I walked out of the airport and towards the car rental place, I couldn't help but admire the beautiful Utah scenery. The sun was shining brightly overhead, and the mountains loomed majestically in the distance. It was certainly different from the dreary and foggy streets of London, and I was already feeling the stress and weariness of my job start to melt away. I picked out a sturdy and dependable brown Jeep for my rental vehicle. I preferred something that had a bit of character and was practical, so a Jeep seemed like the perfect choice. After signing the papers and getting the keys, I headed to the vehicle and got inside, feeling ready to start my vacation. I got behind the wheel of the Jeep and started driving towards the hotel where I had booked a room. The drive was scenic, and I took the opportunity to appreciate the beautiful landscape of Utah. The roads were clear and the traffic was light, making the journey peaceful and relaxing. After what felt like no time at all, I pulled into the parking lot of the hotel. The place seemed nice and clean, and I was eager to get checked in and start my vacation. With a deep breath, I got out of the Jeep and grabbed my bags before heading towards the hotel reception. As I walked into the hotel lobby, the cool air conditioning hit me and felt like a breath of fresh air. The lobby was airy and well lit, and the staff were cheerful and helpful. I quickly made my way to the reception desk and checked in for my stay. Once the paperwork was done and I had my room key in hand, I headed back to the elevator. As I waited for the elevator to arrive, I took a moment to reflect on the events of the past few months and how glad I was to finally have some time for myself. The elevator doors opened and I stepped inside, pressing the button for the floor my room was on. As the elevator ascended, I leaned against the wall and closed my eyes for a moment, feeling the last bits of stress leave my body. I was officially on vacation now, and I couldn't wait to explore and enjoy the small town of Hurricane, Utah. The elevator reached my floor and I stepped out, making my way down the hallway to my room. I unlocked the door and stepped inside, taking a look around the cozy and clean room that would be my home for the next few weeks. I couldn't help but smile as I looked around the room. It was nothing fancy, just a simple bedroom with a queen-size bed, a small desk, and a bathroom. But to me it was a sanctuary, a place where I could let go of all the responsibilities and stress of my job and just relax and enjoy my vacation. I dropped my bags on the floor and walked over to the window, pulling back the curtains to take in the view. From my room, I had a beautiful view of the mountains and the surrounding landscape, and the sight took my breath away. I put my suitcase and bags in the closet, making sure to arrange them neatly so that they wouldn't take up too much space. As I did so, I couldn't help but feel a sense of freedom and liberation. For the first time in months, I wasn't in uniform or on a mission. I was just a civilian, enjoying my vacation and exploring a new place. After unpacking, I took a deep breath and sat down on the edge of the bed, feeling the soft mattress underneath me. I was exhausted from the long flight and the months of work, and the bed felt like a welcome reprieve from all the travel and stress. As I sat on the bed, my stomach suddenly growled loudly, reminding me that I hadn't eaten anything since leaving London. I remembered that the airplane food had been less than appealing, and I had decided to tough it out and wait until I arrived at the hotel to eat. I logged onto the DoorDash app on my phone and browsed through the menu of local restaurants. My eyes lit up when I spotted the KFC menu, and I quickly placed an order for some of their famous chicken. I made sure to order a variety of flavors, including the Nashville hot chicken, the Georgia Gold honey mustard barbecue, and some chicken breasts and tenders. I also added a few side items, including 4 fries and 15 salads and 15 protein shakes, as I was strict about maintaining a healthy diet even while on vacation. When the total amount appeared on the screen, I was surprised to see that it was only $10. I had expected the order to cost a lot more given the amount of food I had ordered, but I wasn't complaining. I quickly placed the order and waited for the food to arrive, my mouth watering at the thought of the chicken and salads. I knew that the food might not be the healthiest option, but I was on vacation and I deserved a little indulgence. As I waited for the food to arrive, I settled into the bed and turned on the TV, flipping through the channels and seeing what was on. The sound of the rain outside mixed with the soft hum of the air conditioning, creating a peaceful and relaxing atmosphere. Suddenly, a knock on the door pulled me out of my thoughts. My stomach rumbled with anticipation as I got up from the bed and walked to the door, already salivating at the thought of the crispy, juicy chicken. I opened the door to see the delivery driver holding a large bag of food, the aroma of fried chicken and spices filling the air. I quickly took the bag and thanked the driver, shutting the door behind me and making my way back to the bed. I placed the bag on the bed and eagerly opened it, revealing the various containers of chicken and side items I had ordered. The smell was heavenly, and I couldn't help but dig in immediately. I began my feast with the Georgia Gold honey mustard barbecue chicken, dipping a tender into the sweet and tangy sauce and taking a bite. The chicken was juicy and tender, and the sauce added a perfect balance of flavor. I gobbled up the fries, breasts and tenders, savoring each bite. I knew that the Nashville hot chicken would be spicy, so I saved it for last. I figured that eating something spicy would allow me to burn more calories, and as a military man, I was always looking for ways to stay in shape and maintain my physical condition. Once the fries and chicken were polished off, I reached for the container with the Nashville hot chicken. The sight of the crispy and red-hued chicken made my mouth water, and I knew that it was time to experience the spicy goodness. I took a bite of the chicken, and the spiciness hit me immediately. The heat spread through my mouth and throat, but it was a pleasurable kind of pain. I savoured the flavour of the hot chicken, the tangy heat offset by the crispy, juicy texture. After finishing the last few bites of the Nashville hot chicken, I grabbed one of the protein shakes and washed it down. I knew that the additional protein would help me with muscle recovery after the spicy meal, and it also helped to neutralise the heat in my mouth. Finally, I grabbed one of the salads and started eating it. The cool lettuce, crunchy vegetables, and light dressing helped to clear my palate and bring some relief to the heat of the chicken. The protein shake and salad rounded out the meal, leaving me feeling satisfied and energized. I leaned back against the bed, feeling the effects of the food starting to kick in. My stomach was full and content, and I felt a wave of relaxation wash over me. The rain continued to fall outside, and I let out a satisfied sigh as I closed my eyes and enjoyed the peaceful moment. The combination of good food, the relaxing sound of the rain, and the comfortable hotel bed made me feel totally at ease. I let my thoughts wander, and I couldn't help but feel grateful for the opportunity to be on vacation, relaxing, and indulging in my favourite food after months of hard work. I felt the stress and tension from work start to melt away, replaced by a sense of contentment and peace. I let out a yawn, feeling a wave of exhaustion hit me. The combination of the full belly, the sound of the rain, and the comfortable bed was making it hard to stay awake. I was just about to doze off when my phone suddenly rang, jolting me awake. I groggily reached over to the bedside table and picked up my phone, seeing a number I didn't recognize on the screen. I saw the number and immediately knew who was calling. It was my military friend and partner, Captain John Price. I quickly answered the call, instantly alert and curious about why he was calling me. I held the phone to my ear and said, "Captain Price, is that you?" John Price's familiar voice came through the phone, and I could hear a slight urgency in his tone. Captain Price told me that he was also in Utah on vacation, and my surprise was quickly replaced with excitement. It had been months since we had seen each other, and I hadn't expected him to be in the same state as me, let alone in the same town. Captain Price told me about the rumours and stories he had heard about the Joy of Creation house, a fan game based on the popular Five Nights at Freddy's series. He explained that he had found the house in the woods outside of town a week ago and had encountered the ignited animatronics, which were supposedly more dangerous and ruthless than the original animatronics from the game. I was surprised to hear about the existence of the house in the real world, and my curiosity was piqued. I had played the game and knew the horror and fear it had instilled in players. But the thought of actually encountering the ignited animatronics in person was both terrifying and exciting. I informed Captain Price that I would be checking out the house myself that night at 10 p.m. I could hear his surprise and approval through the phone, and it filled me with a sense of anticipation and excitement. Captain Price instructed me to bring my primary and secondary weapons along with me, just in case I run into the ignited animatronics. I appreciated the warning and made a mental note to grab my military gear and prepare for whatever may await me inside the Joy of Creation house. After the call, I decided to kill some time by watching television. I browsed through the channels, but nothing really caught my attention. My mind was preoccupied with thoughts of the house in the woods and the potential dangers that awaited me. The minutes ticked by slowly, and I grew more and more restless. The rain had stopped, and the night had fallen, casting a dark and eerie shadow over the town. I glanced at the clock, noting the time, 10 p.m. It was time to face the house, and whatever lay inside. I quickly got up from the bed and began to gear up. I put on my military gear, including my signature ghost mask that featured a skull design, my helmet, tactical gloves that bore the image of a skeleton hand, a bulletproof vest, and the rest of my military gear. I adjusted the NVG on my helmet, ensuring that it was properly secured and ready to use. The gear was familiar and comforting to me, even in this unusual situation. I grabbed my Holger 26 machine gun and my Glock 19 handgun, making sure they were fully loaded with bullets. The weight of the guns felt familiar and reassuring in my hands, and I took a moment to let the feeling of confidence and readiness wash over me. With my gear and weapons at the ready, I took one last look around the hotel room. The silence was deafening, and the only sound came from the faint hum of the air conditioner. I took a deep breath and prepared myself for what was to come, knowing that the night would undoubtedly be full of danger and surprises. I walked out of the hotel and headed towards the rental brown Jeep. The night air was cool and damp, and a sense of anticipation hung in the air. I quickly got into the car and started the engine, the headlights illuminating the empty parking lot in front of me. I pulled out of the hotel parking lot and began driving down the road. The streets were deserted, and the only light came from the street lamps that dotted the sides of the road. I kept my eyes peeled, scanning the area for any sign of the house in the trees. I continued driving, leaving the town behind and entering the countryside. The headlights of the Jeep cut through the darkness, revealing the tall trees and rolling hills around me. I could feel my heart rate increasing with every passing minute as I got closer to the rumored location of the house. The sound of the gravel crunching beneath the tires and the occasional hoot of an owl were the only thing that broke the eerie silence of the night. The road seemed to stretch on forever, and I began to doubt whether I would even find the house in the vastness of the wilderness. The road entered the woods, the trees closing in around me like a silent, ominous tunnel. The headlights cast strange shadows on the trees, adding an additional layer of unease to the already creepy atmosphere. The road was rough and uneven, and I had to slow down to navigate through the woods. I looked around, searching the shadows for any sign of the house, but all I saw was the endless expanse of trees and darkness. The only sounds were the crunching of the gravel beneath the tires, and the occasional rustling of leaves in the woods. I began to wonder if I was on the right path, and the doubt started to creep in. Was this just a wild goose chase in the middle of the night? Despite my doubts, I refused to give up. Captain Price had never led me astray, and I knew that he had indeed discovered something in these woods. If he had found the house, then it had to be somewhere nearby, and I wasn't going to give up until I found it. I repeated the thought to myself, Captain Price never lies. I knew that he was a man of honor and integrity, and if he had found the house in the woods, then it had to be real. I pushed the doubts out of my mind and continued driving, my determination growing stronger with every passing minute. As the minutes ticked by, the road grew narrower and more treacherous. The trees seemed to close in on either side of the Jeep, and I had to navigate with care to avoid any obstacles in the dark. The woods were completely silent, and the only sound was the low hum of the engine and the occasional crack of a twig under the tires. I spotted a dirt path that branched off of the main road. It was lined with tall lamps with flickering lanterns on top of them, creating an almost surreal atmosphere in the woods. The path disappeared into the darkness, flanked by rows of trees on each side. I turned onto the dirt path and steadily made my way down it. The lamps on the sides provided some light, but it was faint and eerie, casting flickering shadows on the trees that lined the path. The Jeep's tires crunched on the gravel beneath, the sound echoing through the still night. As I continued driving down the path, the trees grew closer together, almost enclosing me in a tunnel-like passage. The light from the lamps cast an otherworldly glow on the path, making it feel like I was traversing some sort of portal to another world. I kept driving. The path gained progressively rougher and more narrow, with the trees pressing in closer on either side. The only source of light came from the flickering lanterns on the tall lamps, which cast an eerie flickering light on the surroundings. I clutched the steering wheel tightly, feeling a sense of unease as I ventured further and further from civilization into the woods. The Jeep's headlights cut through the darkness, but they only revealed a small stretch of the path ahead. The rest of the path was cloaked in shadows, and I could only guess what lay beyond the reach of the car's light. All I could hear was the sound of the gravel under the tires, and the occasional hoot of an owl. After 10 minutes of treacherous driving down the path, I finally arrived at the destination. In front of me stood a 2-story suburban house, which looked odd and out of place in the middle of the woods. Despite the eerie atmosphere, I immediately knew that this was the house that Captain Price had spoken of. As I looked at the house, I thought to myself, Captain Price was right. The house looked completely out of place in the woods, and the fact that it existed at all confirmed that there was some truth to the rumors and legends. The house looked like a typical suburban home, clean and well maintained, with no signs of damage or decay. The paint on the walls was fresh and bright, and the windows reflected the dim light from the lanterns on the path. But despite its pristine appearance, there was an aura of unease that hung around the house. It was almost as if the house was deliberately presenting a false sense of safety. I knew that something was off about the place, and my senses tingled with anticipation and caution. I noticed that the house was completely dark, with no lights on inside. The windows were pitch black, and the only source of light came from the flickering lanterns on the path. The absence of any illumination only added to the eerie feeling that the house was giving off. I quickly got out of the Jeep and grabbed my Holger 26 machine gun and Glock 19 handgun. The weight of the weapons in my hands was reassuring, and I felt a newfound sense of confidence. I was ready to confront whatever may be waiting inside the house. I took a deep breath and approached the house, scanning the surroundings for any signs of movement. The only sounds that could be heard were the soft rustling of leaves and the occasional hoot of an owl. I walked up to the front door of the house, my steps slow and deliberate. The silence was deafening, and the only sound that could be heard was the sound of my own breathing. I could feel my heart racing with anticipation as I reached out and cautiously tried the door handle. I stepped inside the house and entered a small corridor. The corridor was lit by 3 sconces lamps, one of them by the door and 2 others on the wall around the corner. It was dimly lit, casting long shadows on the surrounding wall. As I progressed further into the house, I noticed a small radio on a shelf that was playing some old-fashioned slow jazz music. It sounded like it was from either the 1940s or 1950s, and it had a nice soothing effect on the atmosphere. The melodic sounds filled the space, making it feel oddly cozy and relaxing in such an eerie environment. However, the pleasant music could not completely mask the sense of unease that hung in the air. Despite the peaceful tunes, I was keenly aware that there was something off about the house, and I knew that I had to be cautious and on my guard. I walked through another door and entered the main part of the house, which was completely dark. The only illumination came from the small amount of light that leaked through the windows, casting a dim glow on the room. I quietly made my way through the darkness, my senses heightened and alert for any signs of danger. I quickly reached up and activated my night vision goggles, allowing me to see in the dark. The world around me suddenly lit up in a washed-out green light, and I could see better in the dark surroundings. As I slowly made my way down the halls, I held my Holger 26 machine gun in front of me, ready to fire at a moment's notice. The sound of my footsteps echoed through the darkness, and the only other sounds were the slow, melodic jazz music still playing from the room I had left earlier, and the occasional creaking of the wooden floors beneath my feet. The thunderstorm outside made the situation even more nerve-wracking. The sound of thunder rumbled in the distance, adding to the already eerie atmosphere. The occasional flash of lightning would occasionally pierce through the darkness, casting flickering shadows on the walls and floor. The combination of the dark surroundings, the old jazz music playing faintly in the distance, and the occasional lightning and thunder made me feel like I was in a suspenseful horror movie, preparing me for something unexpected and possibly dangerous to happen at any moment. As I continued my way through the dark house, I noticed that there were only a few sources of light, and they were scattered sparingly throughout the hallway. There were occasional lamps on the walls, providing just enough illumination to see, but the rest of the house was enveloped in darkness. I navigated carefully through the halls, relying on my night vision goggles and the faint glow of the lamps to guide me through the darkness. The lack of ample lighting made it difficult to see what was ahead, and the constant feeling of uncertainty and dread was starting to build up. Fortunately, my night vision goggles enabled me to navigate the house with ease amid the darkness. However, the eerie atmosphere and the occasional sounds of creaking flooring and distant music did not completely dispel the unsettling feeling that I was walking into a trap. I walked through the halls, and I couldn't help but notice that there were more halls than rooms that a typical house would have. It was almost as if the interior of the house was much larger than the exterior let on. This fact, combined with the odd architecture and lack of lights, only added to the overall strange and eerie feeling the house was exuding. I continued to navigate the halls, feeling more and more unsettled with each step. The house seemed to be designed like a never-ending labyrinth, with halls branching off in various directions and leading to dead ends. The only source of illumination continued to be the occasional dimly lit lamp, casting long shadows on the walls. As I turned a corner, I suddenly saw a figure laying on the floor, its dim outline barely visible in the dim light. The sudden appearance of the figure startled me, and I felt my heart rate quicken. I immediately raised my weapon and aimed it at the figure, trying to get a better look at what it was. As I got closer, I saw that the figure was Freddy Fazbear, but the ignited version. He was lying motionless on the ground, not moving at all. I was surprised and puzzled by the sight, as I expected him to be hostile and dangerous, but for some reason he seemed inactive or deactivated. I remembered that Captain Price had already been here and must have dealt with ignited Freddy Fazbear. It seemed that he had successfully neutralized the robotic bear, explaining why he was lying motionless on the floor. However, a sense of unease still lingered in the air. I wondered why ignited Freddy Fazbear was still lying there instead of being disposed of or moved somewhere else. The sight of the deactivated robot lying on the floor, surrounded by darkness and silence, added to the overall eerie atmosphere of the house. I cautiously approached ignited Freddy Fazbear, my gun still trained on him. Despite knowing that Price had dealt with him, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I gently poked the robotic bear with my gun, but he remained motionless, showing no signs of life or activity. I could hear my own heartbeat thumping in my ears as I stood there in the dim light, staring at the seemingly dormant robot. I couldn't help but think that something wasn't quite right about the situation. Why was ignited Freddy Fazbear just lying there, not dismantled or destroyed after being defeated? I backed away from ignited Freddy Fazbear and continued down the hallway. As I walked away, I couldn't help but glance back over my shoulder every now and then, feeling like something was watching me from the darkness behind me. As I continued exploring the dark house, I came across another door. The door was dark and made of solid, heavy wood, and it was slightly ajar, as if someone had left it open but not fully closed. A faint glow of light could be seen coming from beneath the crack. I cautiously opened the door and found a set of stairs leading down into the basement. A dim glow of light could be seen coming from below, dimly illuminating the darkened stairway. The smell of dampness and old wood filled the air. I slowly made my way down the stairs, my gun pointed forward. The smell of dampness and old wood grew stronger as I descended, and the dim light coming from the basement became brighter. I could feel my heart rate pick up as I reached the bottom of the stairs and stepped onto the cold, stone floor of the basement. As I got to the bottom of the stairs, I found myself in a spacious basement, lit by a few dim lights. The walls were made of cold, damp stone, and the air was chilly. The basement was like a maze, with various paths branching off in different directions. I carefully started walking down one of the paths, my senses on high alert for any signs of danger or movement. As I moved through the basement, I noticed that the paths were lit by flickering lanterns mounted on the walls. The dim light they provided was enough for me to at least see where I was going, but it also created eerie shadows on the walls and made it difficult to see far ahead. The sight of the flickering lights only added to the overall unsettling feeling of the surroundings. The basement felt like a labyrinth of narrow and winding passages, with some of them leading dead ends that felt like they would never end. The labyrinthine layout of the basement, combined with the flickering lantern light and the cold dampness of the walls, made me feel like I was trapped in a never-ending maze of dread and mystery. I cautiously made my way through the paths of the basement, my footsteps echoing against the cold stone walls. Each turn and bend felt like I was about to stumble upon something ominous and horrifying, but so far, there was only silence and darkness all around me, punctuated only by the flickering of the lanterns on the walls and the sound of my own breathing. The atmosphere of the basement felt heavy and oppressive, like I was walking through a place that should have been sealed and hidden away. The damp air and the cold stone walls seemed to add to the feeling that I was exploring somewhere ancient and forbidden, somewhere that should not be disturbed. As I continued my way through the basement, I couldn't shake off the feeling that I was being watched and followed. Every now and then, I would hear a faint sound in the distance, like something scraping against stone or a distant whisper. But when I looked around, there was nothing there, only the dim light of the lanterns and the never-ending maze of passages. I tried to tell myself that it was just my imagination, but the constant feeling of being watched and the eerie atmosphere of the basement were making it difficult to stay calm and focused. I continued to walk deeper into the labyrinth, trying to shake off the feeling that something was waiting for me around the next corner. The further I walked, the harder it became to keep my nerves steady. Every step felt like it could lead me into danger, and the dim lighting and labyrinthine layout only heightened my sense of vulnerability and unease. I had no idea what was waiting for me in the darkness, and the feeling of being trapped in a never-ending maze was starting to wear on my nerves. I could feel my heart thumping in my chest and my breathing getting heavier as I continued to navigate the basement. The dimly lit paths seemed to twist and turn in every direction, and it was getting harder to tell where I had already been. I couldn't shake off the feeling of being hunted, like something was following me from a distance, waiting for the right moment to strike. I tried to stay focused and keep my senses sharp, but the endless labyrinth of the basement was getting more confusing and disorienting by the minute. Every turn I made felt like I was going in circles, and the dim lighting and damp air were starting to make it hard to think clearly. As I rounded another corner, I spotted another figure lying motionless on the ground ahead. Its shape was barely visible in the dim light, and I couldn't tell if it was alive or lifeless, dangerous or harmless. As I got closer, I could make out the shape of Bonnie lying on the ground. He was deactivated and motionless, just like ignited Freddy Fazbear. The sight of the deactivated robot lying powerless on the floor was a strange and eerie one. I looked closer at Bonnie and noticed that part of his face, his right arm, and a section of his suit were completely missing. It gave the robot an almost comical and surreal look, like he had been hitting the gym and had lost parts of his body in the process. I then recalled that Price had likely encountered this version of Bonnie as well, and defeated him too. The realization that both ignited Freddy Fazbear and this injured version of Bonnie had been taken out by Price gave me a sense of relief, but it also made the basement feel even more ominous and dangerous. I retraced my steps and headed back to the stairs, eager to get out of the basement and into the more familiar surroundings of the main floor. The dank, musty smell and the cramped, twisting passages were starting to make me feel claustrophobic and trapped. As I climbed up the stairs and stepped back into the main floor, I felt a sense of relief as the open space and familiar surroundings welcomed me. The dimly lit rooms and halls were still eerie and unsettling, but at least they weren't as cramped and claustrophobic as the basement below. As I reoriented myself on the main floor, I noticed a set of stairs leading up on the wall in front of me. The contrast between the well-lit and well-decorated main floor and the dark, musty basement below was striking. I wondered what lay above and what other horrors or surprises were waiting beyond the stairs. The sight of the stairs leading up into darkness was both intriguing and ominous. Part of me wanted to explore further and uncover what lay at the top, while another part of me was hesitant and anxious about what I might find. The memory of the strange and unsettling environment of the basement still lingered in my mind. I cautiously climbed the stairs and found myself in the attic. The space was dimly lit by the moonlight streaming in through a small window, and the air was dusty and stale. The attic was filled with old and forgotten items, creating a strange and eerie environment. I made my way through the attic, feeling the creaking of old floorboards beneath my feet. The dim lighting from the window cast eerie shadows on the piles of old furniture and boxes. It was as if I had stumbled upon a forgotten and hidden world, full of mystery and secrets. As I walked, I noticed various items that had been left behind. Old photographs, yellow newspapers, and dusty books. Everything was coated in a layer of dust and cobwebs, giving the space a sense of neglect and abandonment. As I continued to explore the attic, I couldn't help but wonder what animatronic was hiding amongst the old furniture and boxes. The thought of encountering another deactivated robot or an unexpected threat made my heart race and my senses sharpen. The shadowy space and dim lighting only heightened the sense of suspense and unease. With each step, I expected to turn a corner and come face to face with something sinister or unexpected. The feeling of being alone and cut off from the rest of the house was isolating and unsettling, and the only sound was the creaking of the old floorboards under my feet. I tried to stay focused and not let my imagination run wild, but the eerie and neglected environment of the attic was making it difficult. Every shadow and every creak seemed to take on a life of its own, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched and followed. As I turned the corner, I caught sight of another animatronic. This time it was Foxy the pirate. The sight of the deactivated robot surprised me, and a mixture of surprise and unease washed over me as I looked at the familiar character lying motionless on the floor. Suddenly, Ignited Foxy jerked to life with an unsettling motion, its joints creaking as it stood to its full height. The once motionless robot was now alive and active, its eyes glowing with a menacing light. As Ignited Foxy stood up, it turned its head and noticed me. Its eyes seemed to fixate on me, and a strange, almost menacing look crossed its face. The sight was unnerving and unexpected, and my heart rate quickened as I braced myself for what might happen next. Ignited Foxy's eyes glowed an even brighter red, and it let out a loud, mechanical roar. Its entire body seemed to vibrate with energy as it charged straight toward me, its movements fluid and menacing. I quickly turned and ran the opposite way, adrenaline pumping through my veins. The sound of Ignited Foxy's heavy footsteps behind me was loud and ominous, and I could feel his presence getting closer with each second. My heart was pounding in my chest as I dashed through the attic, looking for an escape route or a place to hide. The sound of Ignited Foxy's footsteps followed close behind me, like the footsteps of death itself. I swerved around boxes and old furniture, trying to lose Ignited Foxy in the maze of the attic. The dim light played tricks on my eyes, making it harder to see and navigate the labyrinthine space. I could hear the metal footsteps getting closer and closer, and I knew that I had to think fast. I zigzagged through the attic, trying to throw off Ignited Foxy's course and buy myself some time. My breath came in ragged gasps as I ran, my senses on high alert. I could feel the hot breath of Ignited Foxy on my back, his presence looming and menacing, like a predator stalking its prey. I turned around abruptly and fired my gun at Ignited Foxy. The shots echoed through the attic, and I saw sparks fly as the bullets made contact with the robot's metal body. But the machine seemed unfazed, its eyes still glowing and its footsteps still heavy as it continued to charge at me. I aimed my gun at Ignited Foxy's face and fired again. The bullets hit their target, and I saw the robot stagger back for a moment, its movements becoming momentarily disoriented and chaotic. It seemed like my shots had disabled some of its systems, but I knew that the respite would be short-lived. With a final shot to the head, I managed to overpower Ignited Foxy. The robot stumbled and fell to the floor, its systems finally shutting down and its eyes dimming to a lifeless stare. The attic grew eerily silent as I stood there, gun in hand, panting and trying to catch my own breath. I stood there for a moment, staring at the lifeless form of Ignited Foxy lying at my feet. The adrenaline that had coursed through my body a moment ago was now replaced by a sense of exhaustion and relief, but also by a lingering unease at the realization of what I had just been through. The silence in the attic was almost deafening now, and the reality of the situation sank in. I had done it. I had managed to take down Ignited Foxy, a robot designed to kill and maim. But the question still lingered in my mind. Was there more waiting for me in this house of horrors? I noticed the weather alert on my phone, warning me that the storm outside was getting worse. The wind and rain must have picked up even more since I left the hotel, making the thought of going back in the storm unnerving and dangerous. The idea of braving the dangerous weather once more was frightening, but I knew that I had little choice. I needed to get back to the hotel and to safety. With a deep breath, I prepared myself to face the elements once more. I made my way back through the attic and down the stairs, the howling of the wind and the pattering of rain on the roof getting louder with every step. I steeled my nerves for the journey back to the hotel, knowing that the storm outside was only getting fiercer by the minute. As I reached the main floor of the house, I braced myself for the onslaught of the storm outside. The front door was banging against its frame, and I could hear the rain pelting the windows with such force that it sounded like the glass might shatter at any moment. I pushed open the front door and stepped outside into the storm. The wind and rain hit me with such force that it felt like I was walking through a wall of water. The ground was slippery, and the gusts threatened to sweep me off my feet. I squinted through the pouring rain and hurried toward the rental jeep. Each step was a battle against the elements, and I was soaked through within seconds. The howling wind and the loud thudding of the rain made it difficult to hear anything else, and I felt completely alone in the fury of the storm. As I neared the jeep, I could make out its familiar shape through the sheets of rain. It was like a beacon of safety and dryness in the midst of the storm. I quickened my pace, desperate to get inside and out of the violent weather. I flung open the door of the jeep and climbed inside, shutting out the storm behind me. I sank into the driver's seat, dripping wet and shivering from the cold. The interior of the vehicle provided a brief respite from the storm, muting the sound of the wind and rain to a dull roar. I took a moment to catch my breath and compose myself, feeling the cold and wetness of my clothes and hair. But even as I sat there, I knew that the respite would be short-lived. The storm outside was still raging, and I needed to get the jeep moving and back to the hotel. I shifted the gear into drive and made a U-turn in the dirt path, facing the jeep back toward the main road. The headlights cut through the storm, illuminating the muddy trail and the branches whipping in the wind. The jeep lurched and fishtailed a bit in the slippery conditions, but I managed to keep it moving forward. I gripped the steering wheel tightly, my knuckles white as I concentrated on the treacherous road ahead. The rain was coming down in sheets, and the wind buffeted the jeep to the point where I was having difficulty keeping it straight. I glanced anxiously at the road, desperately trying to see through the storm and the heavy downpour of rain. Finally, I managed to steer the jeep back onto the main road, feeling a sense of relief as the rough dirt path was replaced by a relatively smoother and more stable surface. I took a deep breath and checked my watch, realizing that time was passing and that I still had some distance to cover before reaching the hotel in town again. I pushed the accelerator, picking up speed as I made my way down the main road. The storm was still raging, and the windshield wipers were working overtime to clear the torrential rain from my field of vision. I could see other cars passing by occasionally, their headlights a fleeting distraction in the otherwise dark and rainy night. As I continued to drive, I kept a watchful eye on the trees, mindful of the possibility of another animatronic attack. The memory of the earlier encounter with Ignited Bonnie was still fresh in my mind, and I didn't want to take any chances. Every now and then, I caught a glimpse of a shadowy shape in the trees, but it always turned out to be nothing more than a trick of the wind and rain. The trees loomed large and dark on both sides of the road, their branches twisting and bending in the wind like ghostly fingers reaching out for the Jeep. The atmosphere was both eerie and menacing, and the storm only heightened the sense of unease and vulnerability. I tried to stay focused on the road ahead, but my nerves were on edge. Each flicker of movement in the trees was like a potential threat, and my heart rate quickened each time. I wanted to get back to the safety and security of the hotel as soon as possible. Eventually, I left the dense growth of trees behind and entered a field on the opposite side. The landscape was more open here, with the tall grass and crops whipping about in the wind. The storm was still intense, but at least there were no trees for potential animatronics to hide in. The absence of trees made me feel both relieved and exposed at the same time. On one hand, I didn't have to worry about potential animatronic attacks from the shadows. On the other hand, I was a sitting target on the open field, and the storm continued to batter the Jeep and make visibility difficult. I leaned forward, straining to see through the storm ahead, my eyes searching for any sign of the hotel in the distance. The field seemed to stretch on forever, and it was hard to tell where the storm ended and the darkness began. Finally, after 17 long minutes of driving through the storm, I pulled into the hotel parking lot. The side of the well-lit and sturdy building was a welcome sight, and I felt a surge of relief as I shut off the engine and looked up at the warmly lit windows. I took a deep breath, the sound of the storm muted by the thick walls of the hotel. I sat there for a moment, savouring the feeling of being inside and safe from the storm. The journey back had been a nerve-wracking experience, but I was glad to be back in the warm and familiar surroundings of the hotel. I got out of the Jeep, feeling the cold and damp night air hit me once more. The storm was still in full force, but the worst of it seemed to have passed. I made my way toward the hotel, eager to get inside and relax for the rest of the night. I pushed open the front door and stepped inside the hotel. The warm and inviting lobby was a stark contrast to the cold and wet weather outside. The sounds of the storm were muted by the thick walls, and the bright, cheerful lighting made me feel instantly at ease. As I closed the door behind me, I took in the warm and inviting ambience of the hotel lobby. The soft carpet, the plush furniture, and the subtle music playing in the background all contributed to the relaxing atmosphere. It was a stark difference from the danger and tension I had just experienced in the storm-soaked countryside. As I walked up the stairs to my room, I could feel the exhaustion of the day starting to set in. The adrenaline that had fueled me through the storm and the encounters with the animatronics was now depleted, and my body felt heavy and weary from the day's events. I unlocked the door to my room and stepped inside, feeling the tension in my shoulders beginning to ease as I closed the door behind me. The room was small but cozy, and the warm, artificial light seemed to envelop me in a cocoon of safety and security. I dropped my bag on the floor and collapsed onto the bed, feeling the weight of the day finally catch up to me. As I lay there, staring up at the ceiling, the events of the day played through my mind in a blur of imagery and emotions. The encounters with the animatronics, the storm-swept journey through the countryside, the fear and adrenaline of the moment, it all swirled together in a strange and chaotic mix. My eyelids began to feel heavy, and I tried to calm my racing thoughts as sleep slowly began to take hold. Once I had taken off my military gear and uniform, I changed into my pajamas, feeling the soft fabric and the coolness of the air on my skin. The change from the rough and uncomfortable clothing to the loose and comfortable pajamas was a welcome relief, and I felt my body begin to relax a bit more. Once I was comfortable in my pajamas, I picked up the phone on the bedside table and called room service. I ordered a steak, mashed potatoes and corn, craving something hearty and satisfying. I had skipped dinner, and my stomach was starting to grumble. The thought of a hot and delicious meal being delivered to my room was a tempting prospect. As I waited for my meal to arrive, I lay back on the bed, feeling a mix of exhaustion and hunger. The events of the day had left me both physically and mentally drained, and I knew that food would help to replenish my energy and make me feel a little more human again. A soft knock on the door announced the arrival of my room service order. I got up from the bed and opened the door, revealing a hotel worker holding a tray with a mouth-watering steak, steaming mashed potatoes, and fresh corn. The aroma of the meal drifted up to my nose, making my stomach growl loudly. I took the tray from the worker with a smile and a quiet thank you, closing the door softly behind me. I carried the tray over to the small table in the room and sat down, feeling my mouth watering at the sight of the food in front of me. I wasted no time in digging into my meal. The grilled steak was cooked to perfection, tender and juicy with a pleasant smokiness. The mashed potatoes were creamy and smooth, the perfect accompaniment to the meat. And the corn, fresh and crisp, added a delightful crunch and sweetness to the meal. I chewed slowly, savoring each bite and letting the flavors and textures fill my mouth. As I ate, I felt my body responding positively to the food. The exhaustion from the day's events was beginning to fade, replaced by a sense of fullness and contentment. The meal was simple but satisfying, and it was exactly what I needed to refuel and recharge. I took my time eating, savoring each mouthful, and appreciating the simple pleasure of a hot, homemade meal. As the steak, mashed potatoes, and corn disappeared from my plate, I felt a sense of satisfaction and relief. My hunger was sated, and my body felt more energized and ready to face whatever the night still held in store. I ate my meal while simultaneously sending a text message to Captain Price, giving him an update on my time at the Joy of Creation house. Instead of calling, knowing that he was probably already asleep, I typed out a quick message, summarizing the events of the day and the encounter with Ignited Freddy and Ignited Bonnie. I made sure to include all the details in the text message, including the unexpected storm and the difficulty I'd getting back to the hotel. I sent the message off, hoping that Captain Price would read it in the morning and understand the situation I was in. Once I finished eating and sending the message to Captain Price, I headed into the bathroom to brush my teeth. The warm water and the familiar routine of brushing helped me wind down and get ready for bed. I rinsed my mouth, turned off the light, and made my way back to the bed, feeling a wave of exhaustion wash over me once more. I climbed into bed, sinking into the soft mattress and letting my body relax. The room was quiet and peaceful, and the only sound was the gentle hum of the air conditioning. I closed my eyes, and within minutes, I drifted off into a deep and dreamless sleep. The events of the day receded into the background as I surrendered to the pull of exhaustion. The fear, adrenaline, and tension of the encounters with the animatronics faded away, replaced by the cool and comfortable embrace of sleep.